The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the DRF Gotham Day Card webinar presented by Naira Bets. I'm your host, Dan Illman, and with me today are two fantastic handicappers, DRF Naira analyst Mike Beer and Timeform US analyst David Aragona. Over the next 30 to 40 minutes or so, Mike and David will look at the all-stakes late pick four at Aqueduct on Saturday, then provide us with some spot plays on the undercard. If we have time at the end of the webinar, our producer Jacob Luft will either chime in or forward me some of your questions. If we don't get to your questions, you can contact Mike Beer on Twitter at DRF_Beer and David Aragona on Twitter at Horse to Watch. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that they can catch all the live action on Fox Sports Saturday at the Races on FS2 this Saturday between 4 and 7 p.m. Eastern. The show will feature live racing from Aqueduct, Oaklawn, Tampa Bay, and Turfway, including the Gotham, Tampa Bay Derby, and Jeff Ruby Stakes. Let's get to some candy capping, kicking off the all-stakes pick four with race number 8, the grade 3 Tom Fool handicap. Mike, you've got the defending champion in this race, the morning line favorite, the number 3 Skylar Scramjet, who is cutting back to his favorite distance.
Yeah, that's true. I think in a lot of ways, Skylar Scramjet, the cutback to 6 furlongs for him, it could be key in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't think he's a horse who you necessarily think, can't get 7 under any circumstances. I just don't think he's quite as good going that far. And that was the distance of his last race at Toboggan. He couldn't hold on after setting a pretty quick pace in that race. I still thought he ran well, though. I felt like his race prior to that in the Gravesend was also a really strong performance. That one was at 6 furlongs off of a layoff as well. And I thought he ran well. He's a horse who, listen, he hasn't won a race since the Tom Fool last year, but he's run some good races in that span, in particular his last 2 following the layoff. And, when I went through this field from top to bottom, there were some good horses in here, but I don't know. I think this is a really good spot for this horse to get back on track, mostly because there wasn't really anybody else that I was dying to bet in this race. To me, the other horse, and the horse that I'll probably use most prominently with Skylar Scramjet, is the 7 Fully Vested. And, there are concerns about him, mostly about whether he's up to this caliber of racing. I just think there are ways to look at him and think that he's just getting better with every race. I understand he's 5 years old already, but there are 2 layoffs in his PPs that extend beyond 300 days. This horse, he had trouble getting to the races early on, and I just feel like he's getting better with every race right now. His last race was on a sloppy track. He likes a wet track. And it wasn't against horses like this. We Got Old, You Got Sold, The Caretaker. Those horses, they're not anywhere near the level horses that Fully Vested running against on Saturday. But he ran really well in that race, and I like the fact that he stalked that pace. He didn't just gun for the front. From post 7, I think there's a chance that he's going to try and stalk again. And, maybe he's good enough to be a factor in this race. They were really the only 2 horses I like. The other horses didn't do a lot for me. I'm slightly afraid of Bavaro just because he's so fast and he's in really good form right now. But I'm mostly 3 and 7 in this race.
Yeah, I really agree with Mike about Skylar Scramjet. I think that even though he's lost his last couple of races, he's come back every bit as good as he was last year when he was winning races like the Tom Fool. He is the most likely winner of this race. I'm just picking against him because I like another horse at what figures to be a better price. You see the Timeform US pace projector, and it's got 3 horses kind of strung across the track. I kind of think they're going to be content to let Skylar Scramjet let the other horses go and kind of sit in behind, stalking inside. He's been successful from that kind of position in the past, and I don't think, given his inside draw, they're going to be hell-bent on getting to the lead with him. And just looking at the other speed horses in this race, I just think Bavaro is faster than these horses in the early going, and if he gets out to the front, I think that makes Bavaro very dangerous. I know that he looks a little bit cheaper than these horses, but I believe in the speed figures, and he is running just as fast as the top class horses in this race. His last race is one that you need to watch because it is a lot better than it seems. I mean, just on the surface of things, he earned a 126 Timeform US speed figure, which makes him a serious rival, if not the horse to beat in this race, along with Skylar Scramjet. And Bavaro blew the break of that race, which is very uncharacteristic for him. I wouldn't be concerned about that. It was just a fluky thing. I mean, if you watch his races, he's a horse that always breaks on top. But last time he didn't do it. And for a horse like him that's a need the lead type, I mean, that kind of trip to get in behind horses early, it's just a disaster. You almost never see horses with his kind of running style overcome trips like that. But Junior Alvarado just kind of seamlessly eased him into the race. And he won that race and ran just as well as he had in his prior starts, if not better. If Linda Rice holds him together, I think he can win this race. And Linda Rice is not the type to just take shots in these graded stakes races. If she's running this horse back quickly, if she's running him in a spot like this, I think she means business. And you know, I don't trust that he's going to be around forever, but if he holds his form right now, I think he can beat Skylar Scramjet on the day.
As the great Harvey Pack would say, if we're knocked out of the pick 4 by now, we still have the pick 3. And race number 9 is the $150,000 Stymie Stakes, going a 1-turn mile. And much like the Gotham, which we'll discuss in a little bit, we have a reputation horse coming off of a lengthy layoff at a relatively short price. David, your thoughts on Vino Rosso? And we know Todd Pletcher excels with these kind of layoff horses.
You know, I kind of struggled making the line in this race. We'll see what kind of price Vino Rosso is. I mean, it was hard for me to make him too short because there are horses in this race who are running some very fast speed figures that are just faster than him, who are in very good form right now. I don't like Vino Rosso at all in this race. He's a horse that I've been a fan of in the past that I've just kind of divorced myself from. He just never panned out last year. He doesn't show any speed anymore. Maybe he'll be a different horse coming back off the layoff. But if the same horse that we were seeing in the summer last year returns, I don't see how he's beating this field going a 1-turn mile. So I'm just kind of ignoring him. I don't think he's going to be a factor in this race. From my perspective, Sunny Ridge is just way the horse to beat. Some people might be disappointed by his last race, that the fact that he lost at 1-2 against a field that he just seemed to have over a barrel. But, I mean, there are some things going against him that day. I know that he's been successful going 2 turns in the past. I feel like he really woke up last year when they decided to focus on 1-turn races with him. I mean, the races he ran in the Kelso and the Cigar Mile were just better than anything he had run before in his life. And I feel like stretching out to a mile and 1/8 again, it just wasn't something he really wanted to do. Furthermore, the main track on January 26th, I feel like it was changing throughout the day. And by the end of the day, it had become that gold rail that we saw on the Sunday card that the day following. And Sunny Ridge was just outside the entire way against the track. And I think that was a valid excuse for him. But he's going to be a relatively short price given his name recognition and the fact that Jason Service trains him. So I think he's the most likely winner. But I want to take a small shot against him with Title Ready, the number 5. Because he was also way against the track in the Jazzle. And I just thought Jose Lascano, who was on him that day and is back on again here, just really made a tactical error right from the start where this horse actually broke fine. And then he just kind of decided to take this horse all the way back to last in a race that featured no pace whatsoever. And then from there, he was kind of forced to make this premature backstretch move and go 4 wide all the way around the far turn. It was just a really taxing trip in a race that was totally dominated by a horse that rode the rail on the front end through a pretty slow pace. So I feel like Title Ready is a lot better than that. And I like the fact that he won going this 1-turn mile distance 2 back. I know it was a slower race, but he's a horse that has always shown some potential. And I feel like he's one of these 3-year-olds that turned 4 now, who is just on the precipice of taking a big step forward. And I'm hoping that today is the day that he shows that improvement, because I'm not going to be surprised if Sunny Ridge just, you know, runs well and doesn't quite get the job done, because he's not a horse that has to win this race, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we kind of look at Sunny Ridge the same way. I think, you know, when you start going through this race, he's clearly got the best races. And, you know, maybe this is just what he really wants now. His 3 fastest races last year were all the 1-turn races that he ran in. So he has that stuff going for him. Dan and I did stakes previews for basically every race that he ran last year. And my position on him was throughout 2018 was, he's just not quite as good. He hasn't really improved from the year before. I think he was running better races actually in 2017 than he was last year. And I hope the figures sort of belie that. But I don't know. He's not a horse that I trust all that much at a really short price. I'm not leaving him out of any plays that I make. But I just felt like he was not a horse that I had to, you know, just stand with in this race and that he had to win. And outside of him, though, you know, the other thing he has going for him is it's really not that strong a group of horses. The 3 in this race, California Night, he, you know, seems pretty impossible in a race like this. The 3 horses on the outside, I just didn't really like at all. And I do agree with David's impressions of the Asmussen horse Title Ready. I mean, I feel like he could take a step forward in this race. He's a horse I definitely want to use. But one other horse that I'm using with Sunny Ridge as well is down on the rail. And I understand that if you just look at Curlin's Honor on paper, he is not fast enough to win this race off of a layoff in particular. But this is just a horse that I've always liked. He hasn't run on dirt in nearly a year. The only 2 wins on dirt for him were both sprinting against much weaker horses. But this horse to me is a lot better than he looks on paper. And I'm not convinced that he's just a turf and synthetic horse at this point. I think his dirt form is actually fine. Can he win this race? It's going to be really hard for him to win this race, but he's going to be a big price. I don't really like anybody else outside of the favorite and title ready. And I'm going to use this horse a little bit at a price in my pick 4 and see if he can get there, because this horse I think is very underrated.
6-1, the morning line on David's top selection, the 5 title ready. 15-1 on Mike's top selection, the 1 Curlin's Honor, in a fun edition of the 1-turn mile, the Stymie. The next 1-turn mile is the big one. It's the Grade 3 Gotham for 3-year-olds with Kentucky Derby qualifying points on the line. $300,000 is the purse. And Mike, as we talked about in our DRF expanded stakes preview on DRF TV, there appears to be a lot of speed in this race. And one of those expected speeds is the key to the race. The long layoff horse, Instagrand. What are we getting off a 210-day benching?
I mean, that's the real question of the race. I don't know. We'll see what we get from him. I think there's really a way to look at him and just say, well, I don't really need this horse off of a really long layoff, stretching out, shipping across the country, and facing a field with plenty of other speed in the race. I totally get looking at him like that, especially when you see he's even money on the morning line. You want to take a shot against him. I think that's fine. Personally, I didn't love the alternatives. I sort of looked at this race and felt like if he comes back running, I don't love the way they handled this horse. Obviously, I can't remember the last time that really Top Connection stopped on a horse who ran the two races like this horse ran last year. Just stopped on him for no reason, and that worked out. I don't see why you would do something like that, but we'll see if Instagram can overcome that kind of stuff. He was really impressive in his first 2 starts. I'm not against him in this race. I also sort of feel like, I know there's a lot of speed on paper. I guess my real issue with the race outside of Instagram is that Not That Brady, the 7, feels like obviously the other real speed horse in the race. And I just don't like him that much. I mean, I know he ran a fast race last time. He's been very good for Rudy, obviously. I'm just not really a believer in him, and I'm not sure that the 95 that he ran last time really signifies what he is. If I'm wrong about that, then it's going to cost me in this race, but I'm not a big fan of that horse. So I am sticking with Instagram in this race, and the only horse that I really want to use with him is Tickfin Flu on the outside, the 8. And I know he's only run a couple of 79s, but this horse I think ran better in both of his 2 starts than the 79 buyers would suggest. And I think he's a super dangerous horse in this race, drawn to the outside. I suppose if I could do it over again, maybe I would have picked the race 8-1, 8-6 instead of 6-8. But either way, they're the 2 horses that I want to use in here. I'm not way against Mind Control. I could see him running well in here, but I prefer the 2 horses drawn to the outside.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar view of Instagram to Mike. I'm picking against him in this race. I think I'm picking him 3rd. But I do respect his talent. I mean, if you watch his races last year, he's obviously a really nice horse. It's just we didn't learn that much about him in those 2 races, and that's the most frustrating part about the fact that they stopped on him, because, I mean, he ran 5 furlongs once, and they kind of walked through the early portion, and he just kind of sprinted the last quarter like a quarter horse. And then in that Best Pal, I mean, he was not facing a particularly strong field. So I feel like we know that this horse is pretty fast, but we don't know if he can overcome adversity. We have no idea how far he wants to go. So I'm using him, but I'm pretty wary of him, because you look at that time formula as pace projector, and there is real speed in this race. And not just speed, but there are need the lead types. Like, they've got to try to make the lead with Not That Brady, because they have no idea if that horse can rate at all. And Nick's Go, I mean, he's drawn the inside. Maybe they're going to try to come from off the pace with him, but I don't see how that's a path to success for that horse. So I think they've got to try to hold their position inside. And then I don't know what they're going to do with Mike with Much Better. I mean, Mike Smith just lets horses rip on the front end typically. So I don't know. That horse has plenty of speed too. It just feels like they've got to be moving up front in this race. And that's just going to be awfully tough for Instagram. Maybe he's the best horse. I think he likely is. I just don't totally trust him, especially if he's going to be such a short price, because it feels like a lot of handicappers are just kind of defaulting to this horse, or a lot of racing fans are just kind of assuming he's going to win this race. And I think this is a way more intriguing race than it might seem. I spent a lot of time on this race. I had really a lot of trouble making a pick because, like Mike was saying, all of the alternatives, they're not perfect alternatives. I landed on Mind Control. I just feel like of all of the horses that are going to be forwardly placed, he is most likely to work out the right trip, because I do not think he's some kind of speed crazy horse that needs the lead like a few others. I think he's going to be totally content to just kind of sit behind the top flight of horses, kind of track them on the rail. And I know he handles the 1-turn mile. The question for him is, can he run a faster race? I'm hoping he can. I'm not 100% sure, but I really liked his hopeful. I know he got a good trip that day, but I thought he showed a lot of grit and gameness to fend off Mucho that day. I even liked his Jerome last time. I know, again, he got a very good trip, but he was really finishing powerfully through the stretch, and our brain trust totally came back to validate that number last time. I mean, I know there's some debate about the Withers number, but I mean, it's not a race that I'm just going to draw a line through. Maybe the speed figure is 5 points too high, but I don't think it's 15 points too high. So I think our brain trust is a good horse that he beat last time, and I just think Mind Control is going to work out the right trip in this race. Do I love him? No, but if he's around 9-2, 4-1, 5-1, I think that's a fair price on a horse that I think is at least the second most likely winner of this race.
Completing this All Stakes pick 4, race number 11, this is for the 3-year-old fillies. And again, there are Kentucky Oaks qualifying points on the line, and the $250,000 Busher Stakes, a field that has attracted a big and bulky group. The 10, Please Flatter Me, absolutely brilliant as a 2-year-old filly. She won all 3 of her starts with relative ease, but like Instagram, she is coming off a little bit of a layoff, and she's going to have to stretch out for the first time in a race where there may be more pace. David, your thoughts on Please Flatter Me?
It's kind of a similar situation to Instagram, because while this horse is not coming off a layoff, she's been extremely impressive in her sprint races. It's just, what has she really been beating? And is she really that much faster than this field? I don't think we really know that. Watching this filly's races, I actually do think she's pretty good. She can go fast early. She can really finish off her race as well, even going the 7 furlongs last time. The mile might be a little bit tricky, because if you look at her pedigree, it's kind of hard to make her into a router. At most, a 1-turn mile is really going to be the limit for her. But she's a nice horse. I respect her. I'm using her somewhere, just at a relatively short price. I think this is one you're supposed to take a shot against. Given the pace projector and the fact that there is some real speed in this race, I mean, horses like Philly Joel and Shelly Ann, even Ujjayi down towards the inside, they've got to show some speed in the early going. I feel like this is a race that could fall apart towards the end, and I'm most interested in the 2 closers down towards the inside, Oxy Lady and Espresso Shot. Oxy Lady is kind of a difficult horse to assess because she ran that huge buyer figure in the Tempted 3-back. I think the Timeform US number is a little bit more in line with the quality of those horses. But that number makes her good enough to win this race. And she actually ran fine in the Starlet after that. I feel like people are saying that she just kind of totally went off form after the Tempted, but her Starlet was actually fine. And then last time out, I know the Rachel Alexandra performance was pretty disappointing, but that was a weird race where Serengeti Empress just kind of controlled up front. I'm willing to forgive it. I think she's dangerous in this race, but I made Espresso Shot my top pick. I'm not sure we're going to get the 8-1. It was hard to kind of make a line for this race because all of the horses that are single digits kind of have an appealing look to them. But Espresso Shot, even though she's coming out of some New York bred races, I think she's actually faced some decent horses. Her speed figures stack up well against this field. And I just feel like she's a horse that is improving right now, and her running style fits this race very well. I like that she's shown the ability to kind of run through traffic in her races, and I think Eric Consell rides her very well, and that maneuverability is going to serve her really well in a large field like this. And I just think that she's going to be sitting the right trip. I'm not 100% convinced that she's good enough, but if she is around 6-1 or greater, I think she's the right horse to pick.
Yeah, I mean, listen, David and I sort of look at this race the same way, so I don't really know how much I have to add to this. I like Espresso Shot as well, and for all the reasons that David mentioned. Not only do I like her races, especially her dirt races last year, but I just feel like she fits this race really well from a pace perspective. She's supposed to have plenty of speed in front of her to close into at the end, and she looks like she fits really well with this field based on the races that she's run. I don't think that she's overmatched at all stepping into this race. I'm very interested to see what Please Flatter Me does. I liked all three of her races last year, but if she's going to be the favorite, I don't know. I feel like this is a race that you could really take a shot against her with. And listen, if Oxy Lady runs back to her last race at Aqueduct, she's just going to be really hard to beat in here. I'm not totally sold on her. I don't know if we're ever going to see her run another race like that again in her life. But if she does, she could easily win this race, and it feels like she'll be at least a little overlooked in this race. I just really want it. If we can get, somewhere around the, 6 or 8 to 1 on Espresso Shot, she was the horse I wanted to bet in here.
8 to 1 on the morning line for the 2 Espresso Shot, a filly that really seems to appreciate these one-turn route races. So there's the All Stakes pick 4. Now let's talk about some spot plays a little bit on the undercard. Now, Mike, your best bet in DRF on Saturday is the number is 6 in race number 6. It's just not your day. And it wasn't her day last time out at Aqueduct when she was beaten 37 1/4 lengths. But she now gets Lasix. She now gets Linda Rice, and she's now your best bet of the day.
Yeah, listen, I made her the best bet. I don't really want to advocate too hard for her. She is a horse who's run 3 times, and in 2 of the races, she was basically eased. But in the first start, she bolted. It's just the kind of race that I think you want to throw out. She didn't run for a long time after that. And when she came up to New York with a trainer change, she just absolutely blew away a field at Finger Lakes. I don't think she was beating a great field that day, but she won like she has some talent. I mean, she won as easy as a horse could win that day. Her last start against better horses than this. I don't know what happened. She showed her typical speed, and she just came unglued early in that race. Her rider, Manny Franco, that day just basically eased off on her and let her fall right out of the race. Something looked like it happened. I would have more confidence in her if Linda Rice, who's taken over the training, wasn't dropping her in class. Because when Linda drops horses like this, it tends to be a really bad sign. But this isn't the strongest field in the world, and she's getting Lasix this time. If she makes the front, she just felt like a horse to me who could be really tough to beat in this race. And so I just put her on top in here. I don't know how, these undercard races I thought were pretty challenging and pretty tough. There just wasn't that one race on the undercard that, where there was a horse I was waiting for or a horse who I was just dying to bet. So this was the horse that I landed on as far as the best bet goes.
David, your sort of spot plays in race number 4, and we see one of our old favorites in here, the veteran 10-year-old number 2, Turco Bravo. He's attempting to find his 18th lifetime win. Where are you going in race number 4?
Yeah, I agree with Mike that the undercard races on Saturday are actually pretty interesting. I actually spent a lot of time on those races. There's a lot to dissect in them. I thought the 4th race was, even though it's a small field, I thought it was really interesting from just a tactical perspective, because I feel like the 2 horses that are likely to take the most money are the number 1, Divine Dental, and the number 4, Hall Anchor. They're both coming off some solid performances, and Divine Dental's getting a massive trainer switch to Robert Trost, who's just been winning everything at Aqueduct. But it's hard to envision these 2 horses kind of surviving the 1 1/8 trip if they hook up. I feel like the pace projector is right, and Divine Dental is the faster horse, but I kind of have trouble seeing him getting this distance with Hall Anchor kind of breathing down his neck the entire way. So I was somewhat against these 2 horses, and I feel like this race really could turn into just the test of stamina. And that's why I landed on Turco Bravo. This is a horse that I always like to root for. I've just been a fan of him for many years, and it feels like he actually has gotten into back into good form recently. I know some people might be deterred by his loss at 6 to 5 last time, but as I was talking about earlier with the horses coming out of that January 26th Jazzle Stakes, the main track at Aqueduct was intensely speed favoring horses down towards the rail on January 27th, and Turco Bravo just kind of stalked outside of Shalako that day, who rode the rail the entire way. And I don't think Turco Bravo's performance in that race is anywhere near as poor as it might appear at first glance. The 3rd place finisher also spent a significant amount of time on the rail in that race. So I feel like you really have to upgrade Turco Bravo's performance that day. His prior efforts for a variety of stables were all really good. I like this claim by Merritt Contamarci. He just seems to be doing really well with his claims at Aqueduct. And I just feel like Turco Bravo is getting he's going to get the right trip, and he loves this distance. So if I can get anywhere close to 3 to 1 on him, I think that's a great price.
Let's take a look at some of the questions we have from some of our listeners. And we thank you so much for tuning into the webinar this afternoon. It will be available free and on demand at video.drf.com, the DRF YouTube channel, and iTunes and SoundCloud once we are finished with the program. This question comes from Jim O'Neill. I'm going to ask both of you, beginning with Mike. How much should a handicapper weigh the success of these 3-year-olds on their pedigree rather than their trainers, owners, and riders? Generally, there are not enough races run to allow a handicapper to judge performance. And what is the significance to East Coast versus West Coast horses at this level?
We're talking about the Triple Crown horses. Listen, you always want to base. You want to base everything. I understand that they're more lightly raced now than ever before. You have to base your assessment of them on what they've done on the racetrack. I happen to be a big believer in pedigree. I think pedigree is really important, but it's not nearly as important as many other factors once they've started running. You don't want to invest yourself into how a horse is bred after you've already seen them run 4 or 5 times. Once you get a baseline on how good they are, you should just go off of that stuff. Trainers, are they important? Yes. Riders, are they important? Yes, but much less so than trainers are, in my opinion. And then as far as the East versus West stuff goes, I mean, I don't really have an answer for that. Good horses can come from anywhere. I don't give priority to where they're stabled and which tracks they've been racing on. Judge horses by the races that they've run. That's really all you can do in this game.
Before we get to David's thoughts, I guess basically what Jim is saying is he's basically talking about a horse like Enliven, who's running in the Busher in race number 11, and you don't get a pedigree much better than Enliven. She's by Go
Right.
Sapper out of It's Tricky. I believe her half-brother won the Gotham last year, and she basically has one good race and has been a bit of a disappointment in her career. Is it too early to give up on a horse like Enliven, or do you just look at those PPs?
She's the perfect example for that question, as a matter of fact, because of her pedigree and her connection. She has all those good things going for her, but you've seen her run already 4 or 5 times, and you can judge her on what she's done. She's so far, and this goes all the way back to her career debut, she's just not that good. It doesn't mean she can't still turn out to be good. And they're obviously pressing on with her. They keep running her in pretty big races, but you can judge her off what she's done on the racetrack, and her races are not that good.
David, the second question that Jim asked, what's the significance to East Coast versus West Coast horses at this level? That question has changed greatly over the last 72 hours or so since Santa Anita has basically canceled racing indefinitely, and those horses are going to be shipping across the country. I assume we'll find out the answer to that question very soon. But your opinion on pedigree as it pertains to these 3-year-old Derby contenders?
Yeah, I think pedigree is a really fascinating topic. It's something that I would spend half an hour talking about if I had the time, because I think in the game these days, people have such an advantage with the speed figures and the trainer stats and the trips, right at their fingertips. And I think pedigree is one of the last frontiers where I think you can really exploit opportunities and kind of a lack of public knowledge about, what horses are actually bred to do. Because while there is a lot of data out there, I feel like people don't view pedigrees in the right way quite often. I think you really have to look beyond just a sire stat or, whether the dam won on a wet track or on the turf or things like that. I mean, there are a lot of factors to consider. And I think you really have to take into account, what the horse has shown you up until this point and what the horse is kind of trying to tell you from a physical perspective. Like, I think a good example to use is a win-win-win of the Tampa Bay Derby on Saturday, because just looking at him purely from a pedigree standpoint, you would say he wants to be a turf sprinter because his dam and her production have mostly been dirt sprinters. And I can't recall the last time I saw a hat trick handle the dirt. Hat trick is strictly a turf sire. But I mean, when you see win-win-win run his races, you kind of get the sense that he's not your typical hat trick, because not only does he handle the dirt without a problem, he's kind of this longer, scopier horse who has a strong finish to him, who doesn't give any kind of sense that he's just purely a sprinter. Now, maybe we'll be wrong about that, and he's not going to run at all on Saturday in the Tampa Bay Derby, stretching out the 2 turns for the first time. But I think you can't take pedigree into account too much with a horse like that, because you've already seen so much from him on the racetrack. And the difficulty with pedigree is there are so many factors to take into account. And, I think you just should try to avoid falling into the trap of focusing too much on one thing.
And quick question for both of you before we wrap up, because the Fox Sports Saturday at the Races on FS2 this Saturday, it's on between 4 and 7 p.m. Eastern, will feature the Jeff Ruby Stakes. How do you factor pedigree on a synthetic surface? Do you think these grassy types really appreciate the synthetic racing more than the dirt-bred horses? Mike, we'll start with you.
Boy, that's a tough question, just because there's really so little synthetic racing in this country anymore that I don't. It's not something I think about really at all. I'm really, really hesitant to fall back on that. Well, turf horses like it, and dirt horses don't. So let's just go with that. I'm really hesitant to look at it that way, and so I don't. I don't think I really have a good answer for this. I mean, obviously, I would prefer to see horses run over it before I do anything. If I have to base it off of pedigree, if I could find, maybe siblings or anybody in the family that seemed like they ran on it pretty well, and that's not going to be easy to find in this country, then I would go that way. But I really, really don't like that idea, the shorthand there of just saying, well, turf horses like it, and this horse is bred for turf, so I guess he'll like it. That's not really my kind of thing. David,
your quick thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I don't think there's really a satisfying answer to give to this question because, there are big differences between the different synthetic surfaces. I mean, Tapeta plays differently than Polytrack or the Pro Ride that we saw, or the Cushion Track was, they're all different surfaces. It's like the equivalent of a firm turf course against a yielding turf course. It's just totally different. And some horses are going to like one and not the other. So I think it's difficult to just say, as Mike was alluding to just say, oh, well, turf horses are going to always handle synthetic tracks, or dirt horses are always going to handle the Cushion Track or something like that. You don't know. If the game eventually evolved to a point where most of the top racing was conducted on synthetic surfaces, I think it would probably take the breeding industry a good 5, probably more like 10 years to really adapt, and for us to have real data on how to handicap these surfaces properly. Until then, it's just sort of a guessing game.
Well, that's all the time we have today. For David and Mike's take on the Tampa Bay Derby, please tune into our Out of the Gate program on DRF TV. Also available at video.drf.com, the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel, or on iTunes and SoundCloud. We have handicapping analysis from the likes of Mike Watchmaker, Matt Bernier, Marcus Hirsch, Byron King, Nicole Russo, Craig Milkowski, and lots more. Good luck this weekend, and thanks for participating in our Gotham Day Card webinar presented by Naira Bets.